I am Loretta Washington. Most people call me Lottie. I'm 58 years old, and 3 days ago, I buried my only child. But the dirt wasn't even settled on my baby's grave when my daughter-in-law, Tanya, looked me dead in the eye and told me to stop crying, pack my bags, and get out of my own house. The house I built with my husband Clarence, the house where I raised my son Marcus from a baby to a man. She thought I was just a broke, heartbroken old seamstress with nothing but thread and memories. She thought she had won. I just nodded, picked up my overnight bag, and walked out the front door. She never should have underestimated me, because 72 hours later, she wasn't meeting with a realtor. She was meeting with the Atlanta Police Department. And the conversation wasn't about selling my house. It was about how my son really died. Before we continue, please subscribe and hit that notification bell, and let us know where in the world you're watching from in the comments. Now, let me take you back to where this nightmare began. The November wind at Westview Cemetery cut through my black dress like it had something personal against me, but I barely felt it. The cold inside my chest was so much worse. I stood there watching them lower my son's casket into that red Georgia clay, and my hands would not stop shaking. Marcus, my baby, 38 years old, gone. A stroke, they said, a sudden massive stroke. But my mind couldn't make it fit. Marcus was the healthiest person I knew. He jogged 5 miles every morning before the sun came up. He hadn't eaten red meat in 10 years. He meal prepped his lunches on Sundays. Little containers of quinoa and grilled chicken lined up in his refrigerator like soldiers. That man did not have a stroke. Not at 38. Not my son. I raised him to take care of himself because I knew this world wouldn't do it for him. A black man in America, I told him. You have to be twice as careful, twice as prepared. And he listened. He always listened. So how was he lying in that box? The preacher's words washed over me. Something about going home to glory, something about peace. I couldn't hold on to any of it. My community surrounded me, the same people who had watched Marcus grow up. Sister Mabel from my old sewing circle was holding my arm so tight I thought she might leave bruises. Deacon Williams stood behind me like a wall, his hand heavy on my shoulder. My neighbor, Miss Ernestine, was crying so hard her whole body shook. We were a family sharing this impossible grief. And then there was Tanya. My daughter-in-law stood beside me, but she might as well have been on the moon. She wore a designer black dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her heels were too high for cemetery grass. Sunglasses so big they swallowed half her face. She wasn't crying, not one tear. I watched her out of the corner of my eye while the preacher talked about eternal rest. Her fingers kept drifting to her phone. I saw her thumb swipe across the screen once, twice. She checked the time on her fancy smartwatch and then looked around like she was waiting for this whole inconvenience to be over. When the preacher finally said Amen, my church family began moving toward me. They wanted to offer comfort, to hold my hands, to tell me Marcus was in a better place now. I needed a moment alone with my boy, just one more minute. But before I could even take a breath, Tanya's hand clamped onto my arm. Her nails, painted blood red and filed into sharp points, dug into my sleeve. "That's enough, Lottie," she whispered. Her voice wasn't filled with grief. It was impatient, annoyed. "Let's go. We have guests waiting." I turned and looked at her. Really looked at her. Maybe for the first time in the 5 years she'd been married to my son. I didn't see the woman Marcus loved. I saw a stranger wearing an expensive mask. The reception back at my bungalow in Vine City was a blur of casseroles and condolences. My little house, the one Clarence and I built with our own hands 40 years ago, was packed wall to wall with people who loved Marcus. The smell of Sister Mabel's fried chicken and Miss Ernestine's collard greens filled every room. People talked in hushed tones, sharing stories about the boy they remembered. Someone laughed softly about the time Marcus tried to fix my sewing machine and ended up with thread wrapped around him like a mummy. I just sat in Clarence's old recliner, the same chair where my husband took his last breath 8 years ago, and felt hollow. The photos on the mantel watched me. Our wedding day, Me and Clarence young and foolish and so in love. Marcus at 7 years old, sitting at my sewing machine for the first time, his little tongue poking out in concentration. His law school graduation, that proud smile beaming at the camera. One by one, the guests filtered out. Call me if you need anything, Lottie. We're praying for you. Sister Washington. Marcus is with the Lord now, baby. Finally, the house fell silent. The sun was setting, throwing long shadows across my living room floor. Every bone in my body ached. All I wanted was to crawl into bed and disappear into sleep, to wake up and find out this had all been some horrible dream. That's when Tanya walked in from the kitchen. She had changed out of her funeral dress. Now she wore tight jeans and a red sweater bright as fresh blood. Her face had transformed too. The sorrowful widow mask was gone. In its place was something cold and satisfied, like a cat that had finally cornered a mouse. Okay, she said, crossing her arms. The show's over. I blinked, the fog of grief making her words sound strange. What? The crying. The sad old woman routine. It's done now. Her voice was flat as a blade. We need to talk. I tried to stand, my knees protesting. Tanya, I can't do this right now. I'm exhausted. I just buried my son. I know, she said. Something flickered in her eyes that I couldn't quite name. And now I need you to listen carefully. I need you to stop crying, pack your bags, and get out. The words hit me harder than any fist could have. The air vanished from my lungs. Get out? I whispered. What are you talking about? This is my home. I built this house. I raised Marcus here. Tanya laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that didn't belong anywhere near this house of mourning. Not anymore, Lottie. She walked over to the kitchen drawer, my drawer, the one where I keep the important papers, the spare keys, the warranty cards. She pulled out a manila folder and slapped it down on the coffee table in front of me. Marcus signed this 3 weeks ago. She tapped the top page with one of those blood-red nails. It's a quit-claim deed. He signed the house over to me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get my reading glasses on. I picked up the papers and tried to make sense of the legal jargon swimming before my eyes. But I saw the important lines clear enough. Grantor, Marcus Washington. Grantee, Tanya Washington. And at the bottom, a signature. Marcus's name. But something was wrong with it. The letters were shaky, uncertain. The M was too round, too careful, like someone had traced it instead of written it. I don't understand, I whispered. Why would he do this? He would never give away this house without talking to me first. Tanya inspected her fingernails like I bored her. He was in debt, deep debt. We needed collateral for a loan. This house was the only thing he had worth anything. A lie. I knew it as surely as I knew my own heartbeat. Marcus was not in debt. I had helped him start his law practice 7 years ago with seed money from my savings. He paid me back within 3 years, ahead of schedule, because that's the kind of man he was. Meticulous, responsible, just like his father. He wasn't in debt, I said, my voice quiet but steady. Tanya rolled her eyes. Please, you don't know anything about his life anymore. You're just the old lady he visited on Sundays out of guilt. He was in trouble, I helped him, and he gave me the house. He wouldn't do this without telling me. Well, he did. Tanya's patience snapped like a rubber band stretched too far. She leaned in close, and I could smell her perfume. Something expensive and suffocating. And now he's dead, which makes me the sole owner. I'm selling this dump. I need the money. She straightened up and smoothed down her sweater. So you have 30 days. Pack up your little trinkets and your dead husband's chair and get out. If you're not gone by then, I will call the police and have you removed for trespassing. Her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Do you understand me, old woman? I stared at her. This woman who had eaten at my table every Sunday for 5 years. This woman who had kissed my cheek and called me Mom. This woman my son had loved. She had waited until the very day I buried my child to throw me out of my own house. I looked at the forged signature on that paper. I thought about her checking her phone at the cemetery while they lowered my son into the ground. I thought about Marcus, healthy and strong and careful about everything. suddenly dropping dead of a stroke at 38 years old. I thought about the lie she had just told me about the debt, and in that moment, something inside me changed. The crushing grief didn't disappear. It transformed. It went from a fog that clouded everything to a block of ice, cold and hard and sharp as a diamond. My hands stopped shaking. My spine straightened. I looked up from those papers and met her gaze. She was expecting tears. She was expecting me to beg and plead and fall apart. I just nodded slowly. "All right, Tanya." She blinked, completely thrown off balance. "All right? Just like that? You're not going to fight?" "If that's what the paper says," I replied, my voice empty and calm, "then that's what it says." "Good." She tried to recover her confidence, but I could see the confusion in her eyes. She hadn't expected this. "So 30 days, 1st of next month, I want you gone." I shook my head. "I don't need 30 days. I turned and walked past her toward my bedroom. She followed me, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors Clarence had laid himself. "What are you talking about?" I went to my closet and pushed past my church dresses and my everyday blouses. In the very back, behind a quilt my grandmother made, was a small overnight bag, the one I always kept packed, an old habit from the years when Clarence was sick and I never knew when I might need to rush to the hospital in the middle of the night. I pulled it out and placed it on the bed. Tanya's eyes went wide. "What is this? Were you planning to leave?" I zipped the bag without answering. It was already packed with a change of clothes, my toiletries, and a small leather journal that contained phone numbers I had memorized years ago. I walked back into the living room. Tanya followed me, her confusion curdling into something like fear. "Tanya," I said quietly, stopping at the front door, "you have no idea what you've just done." "Where are you going?" Her voice pitched higher. "You can't just leave. What am I supposed to tell people?" I turned and looked back at her. She stood in the middle of my living room, in the house Clarence and I built, surrounded by 40 years of memories she was planning to sell to the highest bidder. I gave her a small, sad smile. "You don't need to tell anyone anything. They'll find out soon enough." I stepped out onto my porch, into the cool night air that smelled like fall leaves and coming rain. I pulled the door shut behind me and heard the familiar click of the lock. I didn't look back. Behind me, I heard Tanya slide the deadbolt into place. Then I heard her laugh, a high-pitched, victorious sound that drifted through the closed door. "Good riddance, old woman," I heard her say. She thought she had won. She thought the heartbroken old seamstress was wandering off into the night with nothing but a bag of clothes and broken dreams. She thought I was finished. She had no idea that I wasn't wandering anywhere. I was walking toward Denise Carter's office. Denise, my lawyer. Denise, who I had put through law school 25 years ago when she was just a scared kid from the neighborhood with too much potential and not enough opportunity. Denise, who managed the Clarence Washington Trust, the trust that held 8 apartment buildings, 4 commercial properties, and the land beneath 2 shopping centers. The trust worth $15 million, the trust that actually owned the very house Tanya had just tried to steal from me. Tanya thought she had inherited a little 3-bedroom bungalow. She thought she was clever. She had no idea she had just declared war on a woman who owned half the block. I pulled out my phone as I walked down the street I had lived on for 4 decades. I dialed Denise's personal number, the one that rang straight through no matter what time it was. She answered on the second ring. "Lottie, what's wrong?" I told her everything. The forged deed, the fake debt, the 30-day ultimatum, and the suspicion that had been growing in my heart since I watched them lower my healthy, careful, 38-year-old son into the ground. Denise listened without interrupting. When I finished, her voice was ice cold and razor sharp. "Go to your hotel, get some sleep. I will handle everything in the morning." And she did. Because the next morning, while Tanya was drinking coffee from my favorite mug and calling realtors to sell my house, 2 Atlanta police officers knocked on my front door. But that confrontation and everything that came after is a story for next time. Tanya thought she was the hunter. She was about to find out she had always been the prey. Tanya probably slept better that night than she had in months. I can picture her now, stretched out in my bed, the bed where Clarence and I had slept for 35 years. The bed where I held my husband's hand as he took his last breath. She was probably wrapped in my good sheets, the ones I only brought out for special occasions, dreaming about all the money she was about to make. She woke up feeling like a queen who had finally claimed her throne. Meanwhile, she probably imagined me huddled on a park bench somewhere, a broken old woman with nothing but an overnight bag and fading memories. That's what she wanted to believe. That's what made her feel powerful. I know exactly what she did that morning because I heard every detail later. She made herself coffee in my kitchen. She used my favorite mug, the blue one with the little yellow flowers that Marcus had given me for Mother's Day when he was 12 years old. She sat at the table Clarence built with his own hands, and put her feet up on the chair where my son used to do his homework, and she made the call she'd been dying to make. Yes. Hello? Is this Atlanta Premium Realty? Her voice was all sugar and confidence. I'd like to list a property for immediate sale. It's in the Vine City area, a charming vintage bungalow, 3 bedrooms, hardwood floors throughout. Yes, it's vacant as of last night. The previous owner is gone. Gone. Like I was a stain she had finally scrubbed off her life. She was probably calculating the sale price in her head, mentally spending money that didn't belong to her, when the knock came. It wasn't a polite knock. It wasn't a neighbor bringing leftover casserole from the funeral. This was the kind of knock that doesn't ask permission. It demands attention. 3 heavy, solid raps that you feel in your chest. I'm told she stomped to the door, annoyed that someone was interrupting her victory lap. She probably practiced her grieving widow face for half a second before swinging the door open. 2 Atlanta police officers stood on my porch. Officer Terrence Mitchell, a tall brother with kind eyes and a face that had clearly seen too much, and Officer Diana Santos, a sharp woman with a notebook already in her hand, the kind who notices everything and forgets nothing. They were not smiling. "Ma'am," Officer Mitchell said, his voice deep and official, "we're looking for a Mr. Isaiah Coleman." Wait, that's not right. Let me start again. Old habits. "We're looking for a Ms. Loretta Washington." Tanya's smile was pure arrogance. She leaned against my door frame like she owned the place, which she genuinely believed she did. "She's not here." "She left last night." Tanya's voice dripped with false sweetness. "I'm the new owner of this property. Is there something I can help you with, officers?" Officer Santos looked past Tanya, her sharp eyes scanning my living room, taking in the photographs on the mantel, the quilt draped over Clarence's chair. Then she looked back at Tanya with an expression I'm told was completely unreadable. "New owner," she repeated. "That's interesting." Something flickered across Tanya's face. She didn't like that word. Interesting. "Is there a problem?" "There might be." Officer Santos pulled out her official notepad. "We received a formal complaint this morning from Ms. Washington's legal representative. The complaint alleges illegal entry, trespassing, and unlawful occupation of this address." The blood drained from Tanya's face. All that smug confidence evaporated like morning dew. "Illegal entry?" Her voice went high and thin. "What are you talking about? This is my house. My late husband signed it over to me. I live here." She was starting to sound hysterical. I'm told my neighbor, Miss Ernestine, was already peeking through her blinds across the street. Good. I wanted witnesses. Officer Mitchell held up a calm, steady hand. "Ma'am, we're just here to take a report about the occupation status, but that's not the only reason we were dispatched this morning." Tanya went very, very still. "What other reason?" Officer Mitchell glanced down at his paperwork. When he looked back up, his eyes had changed. They weren't just official anymore. They were watchful. "We also received a formal request filed this morning. The request cites new evidence and asks us to open an investigation into the suspicious circumstances surrounding the death of Mr. Marcus Washington." That was the kill shot. Tanya stumbled backward, grabbing the door frame to keep from falling. Her face, I'm told, went ghostly white. All the lies, all the schemes, all the victories she'd been savoring, it all shattered right there on my front porch. Suspicious? The word came out like she was choking on it. It was a stroke. The doctor said so. The death certificate says so. That's what the initial report indicates, ma'am. Officer Santos's voice was cold as steel, but Ms. Washington's attorney seems to believe there's reason to look deeper. We'll need to ask you some questions. She paused, letting the silence stretch. And ma'am, I'd recommend you don't try to sell this property. It's now considered part of an active investigation. Tanya didn't say anything else. She just stood there in my doorway, her mind clearly racing, finally understanding. The old seamstress hadn't wandered off to die alone. The old seamstress had made a phone call. The old seamstress was fighting back. While those officers were standing on my porch, I was 40 floors above Atlanta. The offices of Carter and Associates occupy the top floor of a gleaming tower on Peachtree Street. All glass and steel, looking out over a city I had watched transform over 58 years. From up there, the cars looked like toys. The people looked like ants. The whole world looked small and manageable. I sat in a high-backed leather chair, holding a cup of chamomile tea I couldn't taste. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped the moment I walked out of my house the night before. Across the desk sat Denise Carter. She was 52, sharp as a scalpel, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than everything in my overnight bag combined. She was the only person on earth besides me who knew the full truth about Clarence's will and what we had built together over 4 decades. She was also the closest thing I had to a daughter now. Her father and I grew up on the same street. When he passed and left Denise orphaned at 17, I took her in. I fed her at my table. I paid her way through law school when nobody else believed a poor black girl from Vine City could make it. She graduated top of her class and never forgot where she came from. Now she was on the phone, her voice cold and precise. Yes, Officer Mitchell, that's correct. Unlawful occupation and a formal request to investigate suspicious circumstances surrounding the death of the beneficiary, Marcus Washington. I understand. Please keep me informed of your interaction with the occupant. Thank you. She hung up and swiveled in her chair to face me. A small, tight smile played on her lips. It wasn't a smile of humor. It was the smile of a hunter who had just spotted prey. It's done, she said. The police are at your house right now. Any arrests? Not yet. She leaned forward. But Tanya won't be sleeping well tonight. I nodded, taking a slow sip of tea. My mind kept returning to those papers, the ones Tanya had waved in my face. She had a document, Denise. She said Marcus signed the house over to her 3 weeks ago. I looked at my lawyer. The question I was terrified to ask sitting heavy on my tongue. Did he? Did my boy really sign that paper? Denise didn't answer right away. She turned to her computer monitor, typed in a password, and the screen lit up with documents. I've been busy since you called me from the hotel last night, Lottie. She clicked a file. Marcus actually sent me a scan of this document last week. He was confused. He said Tanya had asked him to sign something, claimed it was about a bank loan. He wanted to know what it meant. My heart sank. So he did sign it. Hold on. She clicked again. A second document appeared on the screen beside the first. It was Marcus's signature from his law license. She clicked once more. A third document, Marcus's signature from his passport. I sent Marcus's scan to a forensic document examiner at 4 o'clock this morning. He owed me a favor from an old case. He just sent his report back an hour ago. I leaned forward, my eyes moving between the signatures on the screen. I didn't need to be an expert to see it. The signature on Tanya's deed was shaky, uncertain. The M was too round, too careful. The W in Washington was cramped and hesitant, like a child trying to stay inside the lines of a coloring book. Marcus's real signatures were bold, confident, flowing. The hand of a man who knew exactly who he was. It's a forgery, Lottie. Denise's voice softened. A bad one. According to the examiner, it looks like it was traced. Someone with a shaky hand and a guilty conscience. Something washed over me. Not relief. Something deeper and colder. My son hadn't betrayed me. But his wife had tried to betray us both. She forged his name, I said. The words tasted like ash. She tried to steal my house. Yes, she did. Denise closed the file. But here's the thing, Lottie. That's not even the most important part. I frowned. What's more important than fraud? Denise leaned back in her chair, her fingers laced together. Do you remember the promise you made me when we set up the trust, right after Clarence passed? How could I forget? I was sitting in this very office, hollow with grief, barely able to function. But Clarence had made me promise. On his deathbed, he grabbed my hand with what little strength he had left. Lottie, he'd whispered, we built this from nothing, from pennies and prayers. Don't let anyone take it from you. Protect our boy. Protect our work. I remember every word, I whispered now. Denise nodded, which is why it doesn't matter if that signature was real. It doesn't matter if Marcus had signed that paper 1,000 times, gotten it notarized, and published it in the newspaper. I blinked. I don't follow? She reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick leather-bound document. She slid it across the desk to me. The gold-embossed letters on the cover read, The Clarence Washington Trust. We established this the month after Clarence's funeral, Lottie. You were in a fog of grief, but you signed the papers. We transferred every single asset, every deed, every property, every brick of every building you and Clarence ever bought. She tapped the cover, including the bungalow on Vine City. The air in the room suddenly felt thin. I stared at Denise as the pieces began falling into place. The house. You. Loretta Washington legally own nothing but your personal checking account and whatever's in that overnight bag. You haven't owned that house in 8 years. Denise's voice was firm. The Clarence Washington Trust owns that house, and I am the sole executor of that trust. A slow understanding settled over me. So even if Marcus had signed that deed, it would be worthless paper, Denise finished. You cannot give away what you do not own. Marcus knew about the trust. He sat in this very office when we explained everything. He knew he was a beneficiary, not the owner. He knew it was all protected. So, Tanya just tried to steal something that Marcus could never have given her in the first place. Denise shook her head. She's not just cruel, Lottie. She's ignorant. She was so focused on that one little house. She never bothered to ask about the empire it was part of. I sat back, the weight of this revelation pressing down on me. The legal victory was absolute. Tanya had nothing. She had committed fraud for nothing, but something still didn't sit right. The gears in my mind were turning, faster now. The grief fog was clearing, and the sharp mind of the woman who had built that empire alongside her husband was finally taking over. But Denise, I said slowly, that doesn't make any sense. What part? Marcus, my son. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto hers. He knew the paper was worthless. He knew about the trust. He was going to inherit everything eventually. So why would he even show you that scanned document? Why would he be confused about something he knew was fraudulent? Denise's professional mask flickered. She knew exactly where my mind was going. That, Lottie, she said quietly, is what I've been asking myself all morning. Why would a smart man like Marcus be confused about a document he knew was worthless? Why would he send it to me asking what it meant? She paused, letting the silence stretch. Unless he didn't create it. My blood went cold. Unless Tanya forged it without telling him. Unless she was planning to confront him with it. Unless he sent me that scan because he was scared. Unless he knew something was very, very wrong. Denise stood up and walked to the window, standing beside me, looking down at the city. It's all connected, Lottie. The fake signature, the invented debt, the desperate attempt to grab the house. It's all connected to the sudden, convenient death of a healthy, 38-year-old man. She turned to face me, her eyes burning with the same fire I had seen in Clarence's eyes the day he proposed to me. She didn't just want the house. She wanted everything, and Marcus was in her way. If you think Denise and I just sat there in shock, you don't know me very well yet. Within 48 hours, we had assembled a team, and the most important member wasn't a lawyer. His name was Raymond Okonkwo. Raymond was 55, built like a linebacker who'd gone a few rounds with life and won most of them. He wore suits that looked like he'd slept in them and had eyes that seemed to see straight through walls. He'd spent 25 years with Atlanta PD, 20 of them in homicide, before retiring to become a private investigator. Denise said he was the best. She said he could find a needle in a haystack, then tell you how long the needle had been there and who dropped it. He came to Denise's office 2 days after the funeral, carrying a worn leather briefcase and a small notebook. He shook my hand with a grip that was firm but gentle. "Mrs. Washington," he said, his voice a deep rumble. "I'm sorry for your loss. Denise tells me you're in a complicated situation. That's one way to put it. Tell me about your daughter-in-law." I took a deep breath. It felt strange, talking about my family like this, like I was betraying something sacred. But Marcus was gone. The time for protecting feelings was over. "Tanya claimed my son was in debt," I said. "That's why he supposedly signed the house over to her." Raymond just nodded, writing in his notebook. He didn't interrupt. "But that's a lie. My son was careful with money. I raised him to be. I helped him start his law practice 7 years ago. And he paid me back ahead of schedule. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't a gambler." I paused, but he was blind when it came to her. He loved Tanya. He couldn't see what I saw. "What did you see?" I remembered Christmas last year. Marcus and I were in my kitchen doing dishes together while Tanya was in the living room on her phone. I had tried to warn him. "That woman of yours," I'd said quietly. "She spends money like water, Marcus. And her eyes? They're hungry, always looking for the next thing." Marcus had just laughed. "Come on, Mama, Tanya's just ambitious. She likes nice things. There's no harm in that." "No harm." I pushed the memory away. "I warned him," I told Raymond. "He didn't listen. Now she's claiming he was in debt. I don't believe it. I believe she was the one drowning in debt." "I want you to find out the truth." Raymond closed his notebook. "I'll look at her finances, not his. If she has debts, I'll find them. If she has secrets, I'll find those too." He stood up to leave, then paused at the door. "Mrs. Washington, in my experience, when someone lies about money, they're usually lying about other things too. I'll be in touch within 48 hours. He was true to his word. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. I stayed in a quiet hotel room, staring at the Atlanta skyline, thinking about Marcus, thinking about 38 years, thinking about all the things I never got to say. When Raymond finally called, Denise had me come back to her office immediately. Raymond sat across from us, his briefcase open, his face grim. "You asked me to find out if Tanya Coleman was in debt," he began. "The answer is yes. But debt doesn't begin to cover it." He pulled out a photograph. It was grainy, taken from a distance, clearly surveillance footage. It showed Tanya sitting at a blackjack table, a stack of chips in front of her, her eyes wild with desperation. "This was taken at a casino in Cherokee, North Carolina," Raymond said, "the night after your son's funeral." My stomach turned. "She went gambling the night after we buried Marcus?" "She didn't just go gambling. She lost badly." He pulled out a second photograph. This one was taken outside the casino. Tanya was backed against a wall, looking terrified. A large man in a cheap suit was leaning over her, his face twisted in anger. "Who is that?" Denise asked. "His name is Victor Molina. He runs underground betting operations out of East Atlanta. High-interest loans for desperate gamblers." Raymond's jaw tightened. My contact on the ground said she was begging for more time. He put down the photographs. "Mrs. Washington, your son was not in debt. He had a perfect credit score. His law practice was profitable. He had 0 outstanding loans." Raymond looked at me with something like pity. "But Tanya, she owes $180,000 to various creditors, online sports betting, underground card games. Victor Molina alone is owed $60,000. $180,000. The number hit me like a punch to the chest. "She was trying to get home equity loans, Raymond continued. "I found 3 applications in the last month, all using your son's information, all forged. The banks rejected them because the house isn't in his name." So she forged the deed, I whispered, the pieces clicking together. She thought if she could get the house in her name, she could use it as collateral to pay off her debts. Exactly. She was desperate and running out of time. Denise leaned forward. What about Marcus? Did he know about any of this? Raymond reached into his briefcase and pulled out a laptop. That's where it gets worse. I pulled security footage from a gas station on Memorial Drive. This was recorded the night Marcus died. He pressed play. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Marcus's silver car was parked under the bright lights of the station. Marcus was in the driver's seat. Tanya was beside him. There was no audio, but we didn't need it. Marcus was shouting. His face was twisted with a rage I had never seen in my gentle, thoughtful son. His whole body was rigid. His hands gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. Tanya was screaming back at him, her face ugly with fury. Then Marcus grabbed something from the console, a thick stack of papers. He threw them at her, hurled them right into her face. The pages exploded across the car like snow. Tanya recoiled. Then she started grabbing at the papers, her expression shifting from rage to something else. Fear. What were those papers? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Raymond paused the video. That's what I spent yesterday trying to figure out. I knew it wasn't just the forged deed. That was only a few pages. This was thick, official looking. He reached back into his briefcase. I started thinking, if Marcus found out about the forgery, about the gambling debts, what would a smart lawyer do first? He wouldn't just yell at a gas station. He would protect himself. He would call a lawyer, Denise said. But not you, Raymond said to Denise. You handle the trust. This was personal. This was marital. He pulled out a thin manila envelope. I ran a check on Marcus's phone records. He made 4 calls in the last 2 weeks to a number I didn't recognize, a family law office in Buckhead, an attorney named Patricia Hernandez. Very expensive, very discreet. My heart stopped. A divorce lawyer? I went to her office this morning. I explained the situation. When I mentioned the words suspicious death and $15 million trust, she became very cooperative. Raymond slid the envelope across the table. These are the papers Marcus threw in Tanya's face. Attorney Hernandez gave me copies. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Denise leaned over my shoulder. The first document was a petition for divorce, filed 3 days before Marcus died. The second document made my breath catch in my throat. It was a new will, dated 4 days before my son's death, signed, witnessed, and notarized in Patricia Hernandez's office. I read the words through blurring tears. I, Marcus Washington, hereby revoke all previous wills and testaments. I give, devise, and bequeath 100% of my personal estate, including my law practice, all bank accounts, my vehicle, and all personal effects to my mother, Loretta Washington. Tanya's name wasn't anywhere on the page. She had been completely, totally, and legally cut out. He was leaving her, I whispered. He was finally leaving her. More than that, Denise said, her voice tight. He was protecting you. He was making sure she couldn't touch anything. Raymond closed his briefcase. His face was hard. Mrs. Washington, 4 days before he died, your son filed for divorce. 3 days before he died, he signed a new will disinheriting his wife. And on the night he died, he showed her both documents. He looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that went beyond professional interest. I saw the eyes of a man who had spent 20 years hunting killers. Tanya knew she was about to lose everything, the house she couldn't steal, the husband who was leaving her, the inheritance she thought she was entitled to. She was $180,000 in debt to people who don't accept excuses. He stood up. Less than an hour after that argument at the gas station, your son was dead. The room was silent. The only sound was the distant hum of the city. 40 floors below. Denise spoke first, her voice like ice. This isn't about a forged deed anymore. This isn't about fraud or gambling debts. She looked at me, and I saw the same terrible certainty in her eyes that I felt in my bones. This is about murder. I thought we had Tanya cornered. I thought she would crawl into a hole and wait for the inevitable. I underestimated her. The evidence packet arrived at my house, the house she was still illegally occupying 3 days later. Denise made sure of it. We wanted her to know exactly what we had: the forged deed, the divorce papers, the new will, the gambling debts, all of it. We wanted her to understand that the walls were closing in. But Tanya didn't break down. She didn't confess. She didn't run. She attacked. I was in my hotel room when Denise called, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. "Turn on Channel 5 now." I fumbled for the remote. The television flickered to life, and there was my house, my porch. The porch where Clarence and I used to sit on summer evenings watching the fireflies, and there was Tanya. She looked completely different. Gone were the designer clothes, the sharp makeup, the predatory confidence. She wore a simple white blouse. Her hair was pulled back. Her face was bare, making her look younger, more vulnerable. She was crying. A reporter, some young man with perfect hair and hungry eyes, was holding a microphone to her face. "I just don't know where else to turn," Tanya sobbed. "My husband has only been gone for a week." A week. She pressed a crumpled tissue to her eyes. "And she's already trying to throw me out of my home." The reporter looked appropriately outraged. "Mrs. Washington, you're saying your mother-in-law is trying to evict you, just days after your husband's funeral?" "Yes." Tanya's voice cracked perfectly. "She's a very wealthy woman. She owns properties all over Atlanta, and I'm just a widow with nothing." She looked directly into the camera, directly into my eyes. "And she wants to take the one thing my husband left me, this house, my home." I couldn't breathe. "She never liked me," Tanya continued. "She never accepted me. Maybe it was because I wasn't from her world. I'm just a simple white woman from the suburbs. I don't have her money. I don't have her power." There it was. She actually said it. "And now that Marcus is gone, there's no one left to protect me." The tears were flowing freely now. "She's using all her lawyers, all her resources, and I have nothing. What am I supposed to do? What can a lonely, grieving widow do against someone like her?" The reporter turned to the camera, his face a mask of manufactured sympathy. "A heartbreaking story. We've reached out to Ms. Loretta Washington for comment, but have received no response." I hurled the remote at the wall. "She's painting me as the villain," I shouted into the phone. "She's standing on my porch in front of my house, telling the world I'm some kind of monster." "I know," Denise said. "The phones are already ringing. Reporters want statements. Some blogger already published a piece called Vine City Landlord versus Grieving Widow." "Then let's fight back. We'll call a press conference. We'll show them the forged deed, the gambling debts, the—" "No." The word stopped me cold. "What do you mean, no? She's destroying my reputation. Lottie, listen to me." Denise's voice was calm, controlled. "This is exactly what she wants. She's cornered. She has no facts, no case, no defense. She can't win in a courtroom, so she's trying to win on television." I forced myself to take a breath. "If we jump into this mud pit with her, we just get dirty," Denise continued. "We'll look like we're attacking the poor grieving widow. We'll be proving her point. So we just let her lie? We let her talk. We let her go on every show that will have her. We let her cry her fake tears all over Atlanta." Denise's voice hardened. "Because every lie she tells on camera is another lie we can disprove in court. She's not building her case, Lottie. She's building ours. She's hanging herself with her own tongue." I stared at the television, now showing some commercial for car insurance. My blood was still boiling. "How long?" "Raymond is still working. He's not looking at gambling debts anymore. He's talking to the medical examiner's office. He's pulling Marcus's medical records. He's tracing her movements in the weeks before he died." Denise paused. "He's looking for the murder weapon." I closed my eyes. Let her have her moment in the spotlight, Lottie. Let her think she's winning. Because when we walk into that courtroom, we're not going to respond to her press conference. Denise's voice dropped to something cold and final. "We're going to respond with handcuffs." Raymond called 3 days later. His voice was different, quieter, heavier. "I found it," he said. I found how she did it. Denise and I were in her office within the hour. Raymond was already there, his briefcase on the table, his face gray. The medical examiner initially ruled it a stroke, he began. But that never sat right with me. Marcus was 38. He ran 5 miles a day. His last physical showed perfect cardiovascular health. He opened the briefcase. I convinced the examiner to take a second look. We had Marcus's body exhumed 2 days ago. I flinched. The thought of my son being disturbed, even for justice, sent a spike of pain through my chest. The new autopsy found something the first one missed. Raymond pulled out a thick document. Marcus Washington did not die of a stroke. His brain showed evidence of a massive hemorrhage, but the cause wasn't natural. He looked at me, and his eyes were heavy with something terrible. They found traces of warfarin in his system, extremely high levels. Warfarin? I didn't understand. It's a blood thinner. In medical doses, it prevents clots. In massive doses, he trailed off. Denise finished for him. It causes uncontrollable internal bleeding, including in the brain. Raymond nodded. The examiner estimates he was being dosed for at least 2 to 3 weeks. Small amounts in his food or drinks, building up in his system until it reached fatal levels. 3 weeks. I thought about Marcus's last few weeks. Had he mentioned feeling tired? Had he complained of headaches? Had I missed something? It's also known by another name, Raymond said quietly. Rat poison. The room spun. I gripped the edge of my chair. She poisoned him, I heard myself say. She poisoned my son. The examiner's report is official now. Cause of death, homicide by poisoning. Raymond closed the document. I've already forwarded everything to the district attorney's office. They're preparing charges. Denise stood up. Her face was carved from stone. Then it's time. She looked at me. It's time to end this. The Fulton County Courthouse loomed ahead of us. Gray stone, tall columns, the weight of justice pressing down from every angle. But I wasn't thinking about the building. I was thinking about my son. I was thinking about the promise I made to Clarence on his deathbed. Protect our work. Protect our boy. I had failed to protect Marcus. I couldn't save him from the woman he loved, but I could still keep my promise. Tanya was waiting inside, surrounded by reporters, playing her role to perfection. The grieving widow, the victim. She had no idea what was coming. I straightened my back. I smoothed down my black dress, the same one I wore to Marcus's funeral, and I walked toward the courthouse doors. The Fulton County Courthouse is a cold place. It's nothing like you see on television. The marble floors are worn smooth by decades of footsteps. The air smells like old paper and bitter coffee. The fluorescent lights hum overhead, casting everything in a pale, unforgiving glow. I sat on a hard wooden bench outside the courtroom, wearing my best black dress. The same dress I wore to bury Clarence. The same dress I wore to bury Marcus. It felt right somehow, like I was carrying them both with me into battle. Denise sat beside me, her briefcase at her feet, her face calm, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. We had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Raymond's evidence. The medical examiner's report, the forged deed, the divorce papers, the new will, everything we needed to prove what Tanya had done. But would it be enough? The courtroom doors swung open. A bailiff gestured for us to enter. Inside, the gallery was half full. I recognized some faces. Miss Ernestine from across the street, her church hat perched on her head like a crown. Sister Mabel from my sewing circle, clutching her purse with both hands. My community had come to bear witness. And there, in the front row, sat that reporter, Donnie Price, the same one who had interviewed Tanya on my porch. His pen was already moving across his notepad. Good. I wanted the world to see this. Tanya was already seated at the defendant's table. She had dressed the part again. Simple black dress, hair pulled back, no makeup. The picture of a grieving widow facing unjust persecution. Her lawyer, a man named Gerald Simmons, with a shiny suit and an overconfident smile, was shuffling papers beside her. He looked like a man who thought he was about to win. He had no idea what was coming. Judge Patricia Morrison entered. She was in her 60s, a black woman with silver hair and eyes that had clearly seen every lie the world could tell. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her presence commanded respect. "This court will come to order," she said, settling into her chair. "We are here regarding the matter of the estate of Marcus Washington, as well as related criminal charges. Mr. Simmons, I understand you are representing Mrs. Tanya Washington?" Gerald Simmons stood, buttoning his jacket. "Yes, Your Honor. And may I say this entire proceeding is a travesty. My client is a grieving widow who has been subjected to harassment, defamation, and now criminal accusations, all because a wealthy, powerful woman cannot accept that her son chose to leave his property to his wife." He gestured dramatically toward me. "Mrs. Loretta Washington has used her considerable resources to wage a campaign of persecution against my client. We intend to prove that these charges are baseless, motivated by greed, and frankly, by prejudice." I felt Denise's hand on my arm steadying me. I took a breath. Judge Morrison's expression didn't change. "Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Ms. Carter, your response?" Denise stood. Her voice was calm as still water. "Your Honor, Mr. Simmons is correct about one thing. This is a tragedy, but the tragedy is not what he describes." She picked up a slim folder from the table. "I will prove, with documented evidence, that Tanya Washington committed multiple felonies. She forged her husband's signature on a property deed. She lied to police officers. She made false statements to the press. And most significantly," Denise paused, letting the silence stretch, "she murdered her husband, Marcus Washington, by poisoning him over a period of several weeks." The courtroom erupted. Whispers spread through the gallery like wildfire. The reporter's pen flew across his notepad. Gerald Simmons shot to his feet. "Objection! This is outrageous speculation." Judge Morrison banged her gavel. "Order! Everyone will remain silent or I will clear this courtroom." She fixed Denise with a sharp look. "Ms. Carter, those are serious accusations. I assume you have evidence to support them?" "I do, Your Honor. Substantial evidence." The judge nodded. "Then proceed." Denise walked to the center of the courtroom. She moved slowly, deliberately, like a woman who knew exactly where every step would lead. "Let us begin with the forged deed. Mr. Simmons claims his client inherited the property at 412 Vine City Avenue from her husband. He has submitted this quitclaim deed as proof." She held up the document. "I have here an affidavit from Marcus Chen, a board-certified forensic document examiner. Mr. Chen analyzed the signature on this deed and compared it to verified samples of Marcus Washington's handwriting." She placed the affidavit on the judge's bench. "His conclusion is unequivocal. The signature is a forgery. The pressure patterns indicate slow, deliberate tracing. The letter formations are inconsistent with Mr. Washington's natural handwriting. This document is fraudulent." Gerald Simmons was on his feet again. "Your Honor, we can produce our own expert who will say otherwise." "You are welcome to try, Mr. Simmons." Denise's voice was ice. "But even if your expert could somehow contradict mine, it wouldn't matter." She turned back to the judge. "Because the deed is worthless regardless of whether the signature is genuine." Judge Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Explain." Denise pulled out the thick leather-bound document I knew so well. "This is the Clarence Washington Trust, established 8 years ago following the death of Mrs. Washington's husband. I am the sole executor of this trust." She opened it to a marked page. "The property at 412 Vine City Avenue was transferred into this trust 8 years ago. It has not been owned by Loretta Washington personally since that time. Her son Marcus was a beneficiary of this trust, not an owner. He had no legal authority to transfer ownership of something he did not own." She looked directly at Tanya. "Mrs. Washington could not give away a house that was never hers to give. Even if Marcus had signed this deed willingly, even if he had signed it in blood, it would have no legal force whatsoever." Gerald Simmons's face went pale. He leaned over to whisper frantically with Tanya. I watched her expression shift from confusion to understanding to fear. She hadn't known. She had never known. Denise wasn't finished. This brings us to the question of motive, Your Honor. Why would Tanya Washington forge this deed? Why would she attempt to steal a property that, as we've established, she could never legally own? She picked up another file. The answer is debt. Catastrophic debt. She handed a stack of documents to the bailiff, who delivered them to the judge. Mrs. Washington owes $180,000 to various creditors, online gambling sites, underground bookmakers, a loan shark named Victor Molina, who operates out of East Atlanta. The judge's eyes widened slightly as she scanned the documents. She was desperate, Denise continued. She had been trying to take out home equity loans using her husband's identity, 3 applications in 1 month, all rejected because the house wasn't in his name. Denise turned to face Tanya directly. So she forged the deed. She thought if she could get the house in her name, she could use it as collateral to pay her debts. She thought her husband was her ticket out of the hole she had dug for herself. Tanya was shaking now. Her lawyer put a hand on her arm, but she shook it off. But Marcus found out, Denise said quietly. He discovered the forgery. He discovered the gambling debts. And he did what any sensible person would do. She held up 2 more documents. 3 days before his death, Marcus Washington retained attorney Patricia Hernandez to file for divorce, and 4 days before his death, he signed a new will. She read from the will, I give, devise, and bequeath 100% of my personal estate to my mother, Loretta Washington. His wife's name does not appear anywhere in this document. She was completely disinherited. The courtroom was silent. Even the reporter had stopped writing. Marcus showed these documents to his wife on the night he died. We have security camera footage from a gas station showing them arguing violently in his car. He threw the papers at her. Less than an hour later, he was dead. Denise turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I now submit the final and most important piece of evidence, the revised autopsy report from the Fulton County Medical Examiner. She handed over the document. Marcus Washington did not die of a stroke. The initial finding was incorrect. Upon further examination, toxicology reports revealed extremely high levels of warfarin in his system. Warfarin is a blood thinner. In the doses found in Mr. Washington's body, it causes uncontrollable internal bleeding. She let that sink in. The medical examiner estimates he was being poisoned for approximately 3 weeks. Small doses, administered in his food or drinks, building up in his system until it reached lethal levels. The official cause of death has been changed to homicide by poisoning. Tanya made a sound, a small strangled noise that might have been a sob or might have been terror. Gerald Simmons was frozen. His mouth opened and closed, but nothing came out. Judge Morrison looked up from the documents. Her face was carved from stone. Mrs. Washington, she said, addressing Tanya directly, do you have anything to say? Tanya stood. Her whole body was shaking. The widow's mask had cracked completely, and underneath was something desperate and cornered. It's not true, she whispered. None of it is true. I loved Marcus. I loved him. Then explain the forged deed, Judge Morrison said. He said I could. It was a misunderstanding. Explain the gambling debts. Everyone gambles. It's not a crime. Explain the warfarin in your husband's body. Tanya's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. Judge Morrison nodded slowly. She picked up her gavel. In light of the evidence presented, I am ruling that the quitclaim deed submitted by Mrs. Tanya Washington is fraudulent and void. The property at 412 Vine City Avenue remains the sole possession of the Clarence Washington Trust. She turned to look at the back of the courtroom. Officers. 2 police officers stepped forward, the same 2 who had knocked on my door weeks ago, Officer Mitchell and Officer Santos. Tanya Washington, Judge Morrison said, based on the evidence presented today and the revised autopsy findings, you are hereby remanded into custody pending formal charges of fraud, forgery, and first-degree murder. Tanya screamed. It wasn't words. It was just sound, raw and animal, and full of everything she had been trying to hide. No, you don't understand. It was him. She pointed at me, her finger shaking. She's the one with all the money. She's the one who hated me. She set me up. Officer Mitchell took her arm. Ma'am, please come with us. Get off me, she thrashed against them, her careful widow's hair coming loose, her face twisted with fury. I didn't do anything. He was going to leave me with nothing after everything I put up with. Officer Santos took her other arm. Together, they guided her toward the side door. Lottie, Tanya screamed, looking back at me. Lottie, you did this. You poisoned him against me. You never wanted us to be happy. I stood up. The courtroom went quiet. I walked toward her, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I stopped just a few feet away, close enough to see the mascara running down her cheeks, close enough to smell her expensive perfume. You called me a broke old seamstress, I said quietly. You told me to pack my bags and get out of my own house. You thought I was weak. You thought I had nothing. I looked her in the eyes. You should have looked closer. The officers pulled her through the door. Her screams echoed down the hallway, growing fainter and fainter until finally, blessedly, they stopped. I stood there for a long moment. The courtroom buzzed behind me. The reporter was already on his phone. Miss Ernestine was crying softly. Denise appeared at my side. It's over, Lottie, she said gently. It's finally over. 3 months later, I walked back into my house on Vine City Avenue. It was quiet, too quiet, but it was mine again. The photos were still on the mantel where they belonged, me and Clarence on our wedding day, Marcus at 7 learning to thread a needle, his law school graduation. I touched his face through the glass. I kept my promise, I whispered. Justice for our boy. Denise helped me settle back in. The neighbors brought food, just like they had after the funeral. But this time the casseroles came with smiles instead of tears. Tanya was convicted 6 months later. First-degree murder, fraud, forgery, life without the possibility of parole. She'll die in prison just like she deserved. But I didn't find peace in her conviction. I found peace in what I decided to do next. I sold the commercial block on Lee Street and 2 of the apartment buildings. I used the money to build something new, a community center, right here in Vine City. Not just a place to play basketball or hold meetings, a training center. We teach sewing, tailoring, alterations, small business management, all the skills that helped me build an empire from a tiny storefront where I hemmed pants and listened to rich people talk. We call it Marcus's Threads, because my son believed in helping people. He spent his whole career as a lawyer, fighting for folks who couldn't afford to fight for themselves. This is how I honor him. Every Tuesday evening, I teach the advanced class myself. I show young women how to read a pattern, how to cut fabric without wasting a scrap, how to turn thread and cloth into something that will last a lifetime. But mostly, I teach them what my mother taught me and what I tried to teach Marcus. Never let anyone tell you what you're worth based on what they can see. Build quietly. Save carefully. Listen more than you talk, and never ever let anyone mistake your patience for weakness. Greed will always overplay its hand. But the truth is patient. The truth can wait. If there is one thing I have learned from this nightmare, it's this. The loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest. The flashiest smile often hides the emptiest heart. And the people who look at you and see nothing are the ones who will never see the storm coming. Tanya saw a broke old seamstress in sensible shoes. She never saw the woman who had been quietly buying property for 40 years. She never saw the trust worth $15 million. She never saw the lawyer who owed me her career, or the investigator who would tear her secrets apart, or the community that would stand behind me when she tried to tear me down. She saw what she wanted to see, and it destroyed her. Now I have to ask you something. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have seen the warning signs in Tanya before it was too late? Have you ever been underestimated by someone who only saw the surface and completely missed who you really were? I want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments below. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me about the time someone looked at you and saw nothing, and what you did about it. Your stories give me strength. They remind me that I'm not alone, that there are people everywhere who have been underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed, and who rose up anyway. If this story meant something to you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere out there, right now, there's another Tanya circling another victim, and maybe this story will help someone see her coming. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, the truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be patient. I'll see you in the next one.